Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. In this podcast, we discuss mystical works of literature and how they relate to recovery. We hope you enjoy today's podcast episode.
Hello, this is Buddy C. Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. Today we have Lori and Brian and Drew and Oscar. Good to have you guys. If you're new to the podcast, we talk about primarily how the Tao Te Ching relates to our recovery. And the Tao Te Ching is a book that we believe was written 2,500 years or so ago by a person by the name of Lao Tzu, Laotzu. That name means venerable teacher. So it could be a group of people who wrote that, not him in particular. Regardless, the first time I read the Tao Te Ching years ago, it just clicked as far as a way to describe this power greater than ourselves, or what is greater than ourselves. And I've come to realize that almost everything's greater than me. I want to say almost, when in reality, I think everything is, but I don't want to go that far. And what I'm realizing, the greater is the moment. What in this moment can you control? It's not very much. I can't even control my breathing. If I stop, I can't hold my breath long enough to stop. So I can't control that either. There's just very little I can control, if anything. And the description of this power that's greater, it just resonates with me. If you're a Christian, you don't have to turn in your Jesus card. I still consider myself a Christian. Nothing here contradicts what Jesus taught at all that I can see. If you guys see some things, please point it out. But this is complementary to, I believe, any religious belief that considers God as love. Because Tao Te Ching is the book of the path of virtue, is how we translate that. And virtue is the path. And we learn that in recovery, that I get better by giving away what I can't keep. What I get, I've got to give it away. And when I give it away, it becomes a gift to me. And this book talks about that in so many different ways. So I hope you enjoy it. If you really like it, you can join us in our private Facebook group by the same name. The only people who can see your membership are the people within the group. I post the links there for this meeting that we use to produce into a podcast. We meet every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, and you're welcome to attend. If you don't use Facebook, you can email me at info@buddyc.org and I can get you the link. You can also go to buddyc.org if you'd like. There's a book there that I penned, which is my interpretation of the Tao Te Ching. You can download a copy, a PDF there off of the homepage. Lots of other resources. Enough of that. Let's get on to our verse for today. We'll be talking about the 66th verse of the Tao Te Ching. We're going to read a few translations and then go back and dig in. Oscar, let's start with the Jonathan Star, if that's okay with you.
Yes, that's okay with me. Thank you so much. Why do the 100 rivers turn and rush toward the sea? Because it naturally stays below them. He who wishes to rule over the people must speak as if below them. He who wishes to lead the people must walk as if behind them. So the sage rules over the people, but he does not weigh them down. He leads the people, but he does not block their way. The sage stays low, so the world never tires of exalting him. He remains a servant, so the world never tires of making him its king. Thank you.
Thanks, Oscar. Brian, what do you have today for us?
I've got the Derek Lynn. It says, rivers and oceans can be the kings of 100 valleys, because of their goodness in staying low, so they can be the kings of 100 valleys. Thus, if sages wish to be over people, they must speak humbly to them. If they wish to be in front of people, they must place themselves behind them. Thus, the sages are positioned above, but the people do not feel burdened. They are positioned in front, but the people do not feel harmed. Thus, the world is glad to push them forward without resentment, because they do not contend. So the world can contend with them. So the world cannot contend with them. Sorry.
Thanks, Brian. Lori, what do you have for us today, dear?
I have Ralph Allen Dale, 66. Wisdom always comes from below. Why do all the hundreds of great rivers flow naturally to the sea? Because the sea is always lower than the rivers. When are thousands of people attracted to a sage? When she positions herself below them, always listening, tirelessly responding to their needs, never commanding, never coercing, never manipulating. Such a sage is forever adored, since she treats everyone with love and respect. Everyone loves and respects her.
That's good. That's real good. Drew, you have Stephen Mitchell for us, I believe.
I do. All streams flow to the sea because it is lower than they are. Humility gives it its power. If you want to govern the people, you must place yourself below them. If you want to lead the people, you must learn how to follow them. The master is above the people, and no one feels oppressed. She goes ahead of the people, and no one feels manipulated. The whole world is grateful to her. Because she competes with no one can compete with her.
Thank you, Drew. Any thoughts before we go back to the first of the verse and discuss line by line? Let's just use the Stephen Mitchell. There were some really good sections from these other translations too that you guys bring in when we get to that area if there's something in there that speaks to you. As I always say, I love this one. This is one of my favorites. I say that every week. All streams flow to the sea because it is lower than they are. Humility gives it its power. They're talking about the Tao. The humility gives the Tao its power. Is that the it? Am I reading that correctly? That's our picture of humility. And was it the Jonathan Starr that said that the 100 rivers turn and rush toward the sea? They turn and rush. 100 rivers, not just one. Just turning one river is miraculous, but this says they turn, not that they're heavy, there's a heavy force put against them to turn, but they turn and rush toward the sea as our example for humility, in that the sea is the largest body of water because it's the lowest. And this is mentioned in other verses too. And being that it's the lowest, has the largest amount of water, and more water evaporates and through the rain cycle, through the what's it called? I always do this.
Hydrological.
The hydrological cycle. Thank you, Brian. It gives back to the whole world. The bigger the body, the more it gives. The bigger the lower it is, the more it has, and the more water it has, the more it gives back to the whole world. An example of humility for us.
And one more thing I get out of that analogy is the sea accepts the water from wherever it's coming from. It doesn't say I'll only accept water from this river or that river, or tell a river you need to give me more water. But whatever water comes its way, it accepts equally.
Doesn't say your water's too dirty. You can't come here.
Buddy, what comes up for me is those people that you meet that are just good listeners, that don't input their opinion unless asked.
Yeah. And you can think about that like the river. The river's flowing into the ocean. The ocean's not flowing into the river.
Yeah.
It receives without discrimination, right? Oscar?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it reminds me of a wonderful book of Alan Watts, which is called about the Tao, which is called Watercourse Way. And it's about the system of the water, because the river, of course, comes into the sea, but doesn't end there. In the end, the river came from the sea. So it's a cycle of nature. A cycle of nature, yeah, that's what it is. And we tend to think as there is a cause, and then something happens, and then, but it's not. It's not linear. It's a circle. I really enjoyed reading this book of Alan Watts. It's great about Tao. And something this reminds me of, somewhere it resonates as, okay, we are all rivers. Like our consciousness is the river flowing into a greater consciousness, or the great consciousness of the great reality, and it's just happening. And we can be aware of this process by humility. So when humility is shutting down our voice in our head, right? So the voice in our head, when it shuts down and we admit that we are not in control over anything, and we are here now, and we are not superior or inferior to any other human being, and we breathe this kind of love, then the humility is in the surrender, and it's okay. And then you make the room for the flow with all its facets. So when you look at the sea, can be really rough, and the rivers also, they can be really wild, but still there is humility because they are low, and everything is low. So this great reality from within us also expresses itself from below. So when I look at my experience, I think, okay, the reality comes from within. It comes from below, and it's silent, and you don't notice it. If you don't notice it, it notices itself at a certain time, and then it's coming to life. And then humility seems, okay, this great reality doesn't take over with violence. It takes over with love and peace. And our head is the fighter. Our head is a soldier, and who thinks got all the solutions. But the great reality within is peace at all times.
Even the smallest body of water gives. The mud hole in front of my house, water evaporates out of that mud hole. It's giving. So we always look at these for personal applications, not corporate applications. We get lost in that. But the personal applications, I think, is where the gift is in these. So that tells me that regardless of my station in life or my station in spirituality at the moment, I have to be open to giving. Some folks in my home, not in this home group, but in other groups I've been in, someone just started working the steps, and he asked his sponsee, can I start sponsoring someone? He says, yes, as long as you're a step ahead of them, that's fine. So not necessarily just with sponsorship, but when we come in come to our first meeting, we're put to work giving in some way, be it making coffee or greeting people or just listening is a form of giving. So for me, I always have to be open to how I can give, always, because there's always something I can give, whether it's my first day or my 40th year. There's something for me to give. So never think you have nothing to give. As you were talking, Oscar, I was thinking about what is it that powers the water? Now, we know that water has no power of its own. Water itself where it's pulled by gravity, is one way we could say it. That's always correct as far as I know. Sometimes other forces are exerted and it may run uphill, but it's going to follow gravity in that. Its path is always dictated by the forces put upon it. It goes where it doesn't resist. In other words, it just goes where it can. So all those streams, rivers, they're being pulled by gravity. They're not going to run out of power as long as there's gravity. They're going to be pulled. There's no power. The water doesn't get tired. Oh, let me rest a little while. That doesn't happen. The water's not sitting there and trying to go faster by itself. It's not doing those things. It's just going where it's pulled. A lot of personal lessons in that. A Tao verse or phrase that would apply would be, we stand on what is already moving. That's like what water does. And I think in our situation, rather than pulled by gravity, we're pulled by virtue, pulled by compassion, because this is the Tao, the path. Tao just means path. You'll see the Tao of this and the Tao of that. And it's the path of, and it's the book of the path of virtue. So this is a virtuous path, meaning for me, and what I've experienced, that when I surrender and I allow virtue, or compassionate living would be a way to say it, to guide my life, be the gravity, it's going to take me and do that for me. I don't have to make it happen. It does it on its own, doesn't it? Oscar?
Yeah, I just remember that there was artists decades ago who made pictures of water molecules and treating the cup of water which he photographed in different ways. And the molecules really changed. So when you talk to the water and you say, I kill you, the molecules change and it seems more dirty and it seems far more harmonious in where it's treated with love. So this experiment is really far beyond how far our brains can go, at least my brain. It's really amazing that they also did it with the rice, so cups of rice and with water. But the special thing about water is that we are, I think, 80% or 70% made out of water. So if we are made out of water and you treat us with love, or you treat someone else with love, you take care of their water molecules. It's amazing. It's amazing that there is this power of energy. And in a way, it's sensible in what you said also, buddy. In a way, it's sensible by giving and being kind and loving, and that's it. Amazing.
And that doesn't mean, Oscar, that we're a pushover. That's not what that means. You could take this in one direction and intellectually look at this and totally miss the gift. There was a line, I was meeting with a sponsee earlier, and we were reading the Winsa, and there's a line out of the 77th verse that says, "Intellect eventually runs out of tricks." Wow, that's good. I'm going to use that in a devotion. Intellectualism runs out of tricks. Our thinking is going to run out of ideas. We just surrender to what is. That's what step 6 and 7 do, is they shape us through compassionate living. That's why if I want to get over resentment, what do? I pray for the person. Doesn't matter it says if it's empty words and we don't mean it, we do that anyway, because it's a way we can surrender to the situation is what we're doing. We're surrendering to the resentment. The empty words, do it anyway. That's getting virtue into the compassion into the situation. That's why gratitude is so important. It does the same thing. Drew?
Yeah, I feel like with things like resentment or intellectualism, trying to go against your true nature, I feel like that, to continue with the metaphor, I feel like that's putting an obstacle in the water's path, putting a rock in the middle of a river. The water's gonna it's going to erode it. It's going to, push it downstream. Or if the rock's too big, it's just going to find a new path around it. Trying to control the water like that, trying to, force it to go in a different direction than you want it to. You're good luck with that. Every dam we build is eventually going to fail. Hopefully not soon, but over time it will. Every time we try to divert some water somewhere, that almost always causes unintended consequences that we don't see. Flooding in an area that usually doesn't get flooding. Trying to control things that are beyond my control, trying to force things that don't need to be forced. I like this metaphor with that. Just if I can stay with the flow of the water, my ride down the river is going to be a lot more enjoyable, a lot more pleasant, a lot safer than if I'm trying to force my way or trying to force the water to do something that is against its nature.
Thank you, Drew. Another thing with this, the rivers are constantly giving back too. It's not that the rest of the water is not giving according to its size and capability. No, we're not doing any evaporation until we get to the ocean. The ocean does all of that. We don't do any of that. That's crazy. Isn't that what we think a lot of times? Oh, the group doesn't need my money. We don't give because we may give sometimes because someone's in need, but the real reason we give is because we're in need. If you do dam the water up, Drew, like you were talking about, it's still going to give back. It doesn't stop giving. Huh?
Yeah, even that little mud pond, mud puddle outside your house, it's supporting life. It's not supporting fish or anything like that, but it's supporting the little single-celled organisms that feed off the sunlight and produce oxygen. It's giving life to the ugliest little mud puddle is helping you and me survive.
Well, this is a thing too, Drew. Is the mud puddle in control of how much it gives? Is it controlling the sun and the clouds and all those things? If we think of ourselves as if we were water, there's really no control. It goes where it's being pulled. It doesn't control which way it goes. It doesn't make a decision. No, I don't want to go that way. Let's go this way instead. That never happens. But how often do we try to do that? And I think in recovery, we'd call that being the director, not playing our part. Oh, no, I don't think we should go that direction. Let's go over here instead. I want to go uphill over to this area. That's pretty. Let's go over there. The water's totally surrendered. Oh, if anyone wants to see about the water molecules, just Google water molecules change with words. It was a Dr. Emoto that did all of this molecule study. Take a look at that. It's pretty interesting. We really do just see through a glass, like we're looking through a glass dimly, right? We don't know a fraction of what's really going on. We have no idea. Okay, let's move on to the next phrase. We could talk all day about water and the effects. Water's part. If you want to govern people, this is an example of water as first as in a governmental example. If you want to govern the people, you must place yourself below them. If you want to lead the people, you must learn how to follow. Okay, let's flip that to a personal application. If I want virtue to control my life, if I want the benefits of living compassionately, then I have to let love rule. I have to let compassion rule. That would be the governing in my thinking. You guys interrupt me anytime you've got something. Does that make sense? Am I looking at that? Do y'all see the personal application differently? Good, thank you. So how can I follow in my daily life? Oscar?
Yeah, when I flip this to a personal level, I think, okay, if I read the line, and I'm reading Jonathan Starr now, I read, he who wishes to rule over the people must speak as if below them. I suppose that the people are my thoughts and my feelings. So the main ingredients of my ego, my thoughts and feelings. And I would like no longer like to be the director, and I want to live in compassion and love, and I have this knowledge, or this not this knowledge, but this idea. Okay, I don't want these people to be in charge anymore. Then I need a higher power, which comes from within. But this higher power governs from below, so it governs in humility and in peace. And for instance, it's a really, what for me is an amazing thing is that when I'm in a turmoil of feelings or thoughts, is just sit down and watch it. And then in a way, I govern it by just watching it. It's going, but I am not that anymore. So the leadership in my personality has changed from all these loud voices who say this way to the quiet center of being, which is watching it in peace. And then the identification immediately comes of itself, the identification with this peace. And then I try to let go as far as possible in that moment by our steps 6 and 7, or by letting go. I let the mess go, and then I go do something for somebody else. And then I actually live in compassion without having pushed it forward and saying, okay, from now on, I'm going to be a compassionate person. And in the meanwhile, all the turmoil is pushed down, because then sooner or later I am fried, because at a certain moment it comes out. So for me, the way is first internally, okay, who is governing here? The peace is governing, and then compassion and helpfulness will find their way out in a way. And then, yeah, and then it cultivates itself actually, because giving is the same as receiving. So I give my love and I receive the love. And then I am governed by the sage who is not commanding, who is not controlling, who is always friendly actually, and without actually having any opinion about what's happening anyway. If I go the other way around and I think, okay, but now I need to be compassionate, it sometimes works also, but it's always like a short-term solution. So it works for short term, and then if I don't do the rest of the letting go process, there's going to be trouble. But for a short moment, it will work to be compassionate just with my kids or with fellows or with sponsees. The sponsees drive me crazy, and then sometimes I have to do the compassion trick, and then afterwards, I say, okay, who's going to govern this life I seem to be living? That's the way I try to live this.
Oscar, how can we, or anyone, how can we, the phrase giving and receiving are the same? If we relate that to water, whether the water's evaporating or whether it's flowing or whether it's frozen, whatever the case, it's still water. It hasn't lost its waterness. It's no less water when it's evaporating.
It's always the same amount.
Yeah, it's just a different phase of the cycle, but it's still moisture. I think that's the giving and receiving being the same, if you want to equate it to water. Yeah, I want to talk some more about this idea of placing myself below, because that, I don't say the trick, but that's the whole jest, is how we place ourselves below.
The first thing that comes to my mind with that is, for the first time in my life, I'm leading a team at work. I've got several people under me, and that's new for me. And I find that they do their work better, and my life goes a lot easier when I'm more in a position of, how can I help you? What can I do for you? They're the ones who are actually doing the work. You tell me what it's like doing your job right now. What do you need more of? What do you need less of? Rather than going the opposite way and saying, okay, here's what y'all need to do. Now go do it. And I don't want to hear any excuses. Don't tell me how things need to change. I'll tell you how things need to change. I've had bosses like that, and that never goes well. If they either don't last in that position long, or if they do, then I don't last in that position long. I go somewhere else. But it's just a lot more peaceful in my life, and my team members. I know that I hear from them. I hear how appreciative they are of somebody actually asking them, "What can I do for you?" I'm always there for you. If you have a question, if you want to know why we do something, then please let me know. And I know that for a lot of people, that would be a form of humility. Is technically I'm above them, but really I'm letting them guide me to tell me, how I can set the conditions in place for them to do the best job they can. So that was the first thing that came to mind when we read this verse.
Thank you, Drew. Oscar?
Yeah, I really share this experience with Drew with working in a team and as a leader, or I'm a so-called leader, and I work with a team of a couple of people and working from below. Okay, we're going to do this together. And I trust this process, and I trust you guys. Really brings in another energy into my writer's room, or my writer's room. It's a writer's room in which I work. So it's a couple of writers, but I'm the final responsible. Yeah, so this really works for me. Like the humility in this and the trust. I really need to trust for the process and in everyone's qualities and everything. So when something is going wrong, you solve it in a way together without me saying you have to solve this like this and this, but together. And anyway, the end result is that the work environment is so much more relaxed than when I work in a hierarchy which is strict and everybody's scared. And I recognize it also in meetings. When I go to meetings, I see so many people who are sitting there for themselves. And you just need a slight change of mind that you come to the meeting for someone else. And it makes a world of difference. So last week, someone came in after 7 years sober. He had a relapse, and he didn't go to meetings anymore. He had a relapse, and now tonight he had a difficult night, and he's sharing this difficult. And I needed this meeting, and it was such a relief because I told him it's great that you are here because you share this with us. So you help. And I hope, because he also said, I don't know if I come back next time. So I said, I hope you will come back next time because you can help people. And it's such a slight different angle, at least for going to work. Who can I help at work? And who can I help in meetings? It's really amazing that I'm not in the center anymore, right? So it's going to be okay with me. I don't have to worry about it.
You're not pushing
Don't
the
worry
water.
about other people.
You're
Sorry?
not pushing it anymore, right? You're not pushing the water.
No.
You're allowing yourself to be led. You're allowing the pull. There's a line out of Jonathan Starr that says, he leads the people, but he does not block their way. I think of resistance when I think about that. I have this attraction, this pull, let's say, we all get that nudge, I think, of things that we know we need to do, but it might be uncomfortable, might be inconvenient. I'll do that later. Whatever. That's blocking my way. I'm resisting. If we have that nudge, as long as the result is something positive, whether it's a true intuition or not, really doesn't matter, in my opinion. It's like you get to the stop sign. Should I turn left or right? Left or doesn't matter as long as you turn. Just keep going. Doesn't matter. That kind of thinking. I think this is all about surrender too, Brian.
Buddy, what comes up for me is when I get those phone calls and it's a friend that says, "Hey, can we have lunch next week?" And immediately I think, man, I got so much going on. But every time I do that, it helps me just as much or more than it helps both of us. And it's like the 12th step in the program. It's like the program dies if I just say, I'm fixed. I'm out of here. I've graduated.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah. Then it's my turn to give back.
It's Lori.
Yes, ma'am.
I've been listening, and there was something there that showed up when I looked at the definition of humility: accept the control of others and willingness to serve. And water is that by nature, right? It's one of the most powerful elements on the planet, weather-wise and erosion, and it controls life, right? We look for life on other planets based on whether or not there's water. And so I think it's interesting that by nature, the most powerful element, or one of the most powerful elements, goes to the lowest point. And then we get to talk about what's low versus high. And it's just admitting no control. It's trusting in what? Gravity, sunshine for evaporation. It's trusting in the entire process, the nature of things. And it's just doing its thing, flowing and just being its own nature without control. So I just find that as a great inspiring bit there. And that the less we try control, manipulate, coerce others. I learned that the hard way trying to get my partner sober. Doesn't work. No, he'll get there. They'll get there whenever they get there. The best I can do is be a good example. And so anyway, that's if you want to govern people, you must place yourself below them. And that to me just means you don't try and control or manipulate them. It doesn't mean below as in beneath or not good enough or not as good as, but just as I give, surrender. Yeah. I let go. I release all control, or my idea of what's best, or all these crazy thoughts I have about what would make it better and more.
I can fix you.
Yeah.
Just listen to me.
Yeah,
I know.
One of my favorite little mantras is there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to prove. There's nothing to fix. Yeah. There's nothing wrong. Boom.
Have y'all considered, this is an idea that I think I'm going to write about eventually, that not only is God God is love, and we can look at God as an example of love, but our idea of God, but we can also look at water as our example of how to love. Everything about water is telling us how to love. Think about it. A lot of examples there. What if we took, and he who wishes to rule over the people must speak as if below them? What if we substituted people for fear? He who wishes to rule over fear must speak as if below them. I must surrender to my fear, right? Got to stop fighting it. And the way I stop fighting it, we have a really good example, page 84 in the big book. We continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Yeah, at once let me read it so I don't get it. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. If we did not, the way I think that really works, rather than me asking God and God zapping me and that being gone, the way it really works for me is, that's the dangerous part of this, is When I ask for that to be removed, what I'm really saying is I will allow love to change me. Because what happens? I'm put in a situation where I choose compassionate living over fear. Back to the really easy one, have a resentment. If I'm choosing love, I'm praying for the person. That's putting myself below the fear. And all the other ways that we're taught to give. Bill Wilson talked about, Bill W., that he felt a little uneasy, so he wanted some insurance. So he went up to the hospital and started working with some drunks at the hospital because he felt uncomfortable. That was him getting below his alcoholism, him surrendering to his alcoholism. And we can talk about example after example of that. That just can go on. You know, that's what the whole program's about, really, is showing us how to surrender to our fear. And the way that happens for me is I move from a fear-based life to a compassion-based life. That's the difference. That's the difference. We ask God to remove them at once. We discuss them with someone immediately. All this is quick. You can do all this in 60 seconds or less. Discuss them with someone immediately, number 2. 3, you make amends quickly if you've harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Doesn't say we stop what we're doing and go volunteer somewhere. That's not what it's saying. It's saying we turn our thoughts to someone we can help. It can happen like this. I have sponsees who text me out of the blue. They say, page 84, fear of financial insecurity. Okay, I know what they're doing. They're using me for the person to tell. And I may respond back I may not respond at all. If I do respond back, it may be, okay, so who are you praying for? Who are your thoughts going to help? At first, I had a guy that was getting divorced and he was all tore up about it. And rightly, and he said, I'm praying for all those men out there getting divorced. I said, no, that's not who. It's someone. Give me one person that you're praying for. One person. He thought a minute. And I said, just a first name. And he thought a few minutes and gave me, and I said, that's the person. Every time you start getting in your head about your divorce, that's who I want you praying for. That one person, not do some broad thing, because we get lost in that, or I do. And this addresses it. We resolutely, that's what we do immediately, turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code, and we have ceased fighting anything and anyone, even alcohol. We're letting gravity pull us. Love and tolerance is our code. We're not trying to go uphill anymore. We've ceased fighting anything and anyone, including alcohol, even alcohol. Go to this last section. The master is above the people and no one feels oppressed. She goes ahead of the people and no one feels manipulated. That's being right-sized, isn't it? The whole world is grateful to her. The whole world is grateful. I really like this last one. Because she competes with, no one can compete with her. That dog-eat-dog fight I used to think I was in, it's our choice whether we're competing with someone or not. Even though we may have other people in the same business we're in, that doesn't mean we have to compete with them. Is that resonating, Brian? I'm thinking of you when I'm saying that.
Me into this. Yeah. Yeah.
You can be in a place with this to where even if we have people selling the same products we're selling, am I really competing with them?
There's enough water to go around.
See, I'm not responsible for the amount of water that goes around, really. If I'm like the water, I'm just going where I'm being pulled. Had someone, one of my friends in AA would say, go where you're being pushed. I'm like, yeah, I can see that. That's very Taoist. Quit fighting. If we approach any situation from a place of compassion, a place of helpfulness, we can start seeing how we can stop the fight. We can be in any situation and not fight. Doesn't mean we don't protect ourselves. Doesn't mean if we're done wrong, we don't sue somebody. It doesn't mean any of those things. We can enter a lawsuit from a place of compassion if we really want to. We don't have to be angry at the people. Don't we know that any situation we're in, we can handle the situation better without the anger and resentment? Drew?
Yeah, that last line, because she competes with no one can compete with her. The one thing that brings up for me, and the way that I've applied that in my life, is not trying to compare myself with others, the competition, rather than the competition being, some worldly competition, business or something like that. The competition that I create in my own head with somebody else. Was this person better than me? And was this being envious of what somebody else may have, feeling less than somebody else in some way, trying to compete in this kind of game that I've made up in my own head, where I want to feel like I'm better than them, or I want to feel like they're worse than me. I want to feel like they do something wrong. I'm looking for somebody else's faults so I can feel better about myself.
It's fear talking, isn't it, Drew?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Fear and insecurity. Or if I just compare myself with an idealized, perfect version of my own self, the less I can get out of the more I can get out of my head, more I can stay away from those comparisons of comparing somebody else with me or comparing myself to something I've made up. Certainly, the more peaceful I am with myself, the more accepting I am, the more self-confidence I have, and the more I'm able to just be with somebody, rather than being with people and trying to figure out what's the hierarchy, who's better than who, what's this person doing that they shouldn't be doing, or anything like that. Just the more I can accept the situation, accept people for who they are, see the good in people without taking it personally. It's just so much more freeing way to live when I'm not doing those competitions, when I'm not doing that comparison.
Thank you, Drew. Brian?
Yeah, for me, with what Drew was talking about, is that comparing my insides to others' outsides. And I do that every time. I always lose.
And you can flip that too, Brian.
Yeah.
I judge myself on my intentions. I judge others on their actions while I'm judging. Okay, that's the problem.
The judging.
The way I look at it, though, I cut myself slack because I didn't really, I rationalized.
They deserved it.
I don't give them the same rationalization that I give myself. And then I'm taking it personally, of course. How dare they do that to me? Yeah.
They're sick. They just don't know any better.
Bless them, Jesus. I looked up the phrase, fear knocked at the door and faith answered. I'd rather say fear knocked at the door and love answered, or compassion answered. There was no one there. That's really it. If we answer that door with compassion, there's never anyone there. That's strong. If someone's competing with us and getting under our skin, rather than looking at them, it might be good to turn that light around and ask ourselves, what are we afraid of? What fear are we protecting? Is it the fear of financial insecurity? Is it people pleasing? Is it some pride that's involved in this, that we're afraid of failure because we don't want to look like a failure to our friends and family? All those things have a source of fear. I can always use gratitude as well to get right sized. I've had situations where businesses have failed. I've lost money. I've made money. When you're in business, those things happen for a lot of, especially people who do different businesses like I have. But I've always been taken care of through all of that. I can't see a time that what I needed was not there. Might not have been exactly what I wanted or how I wanted it. Yeah. I can say it wasn't ideal always. But I remember I bought a house, a lease purchase that I was selling, and I had to sell my home and liquidate assets because of a trucking company that I was involved in that went belly up. It just so happened this house was available that I had just bought to lease purchase. And so instead of selling it, I moved in it myself. It was available right when I needed it. Things like that. That's not the way I would have wanted it to happen. I was taken care of. The things I was upset about were parts of that pride and ego that I did not want to surrender. Ways I was still being above, not below. Water is definitely our example of how to love. Anything else, guys? That's been good. Good conversation today. I hope you have a good week. We'll see you next week.
Hello, this is Buddy C. I wanted to make you aware of several recovery-related resources that I've posted in the episode description. These resources include a list of recovery podcasts, a free sober meditation app, daily recovery email, shared Google recovery calendars. Hope you put some of these resources to use and have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends in recovery.